Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. We got Kip Adams with me today on this Tuesday as we are getting ready for what'll probably be another busy week in the lead up to the Peach Bowl for Georgia in a few weeks. Got a lot to tackle in this episode, but I think we would be remiss not to start with the big news in college football with the death of Mike Leach on Monday night. Mike Leach, one of the pioneers of the air raid offense, an offense that was so huge in college football. Only 61 years old, really kind of rose to fame as far as coaching at Texas Tech, but had been in Valdosta State with Hal Mumme, had gone with Hal to Kentucky, offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Again, coach at Texas Tech, a lot of success there. As a fan, kind of coming up at that time, I'll always kind of think about those offenses and Michael Crabtree making that catch against Texas, and they beat Texas. Went on, coached at Washington State, coached at Mississippi State the last 3 seasons. Terribly sad. Just an awful day, in my opinion, for college football. He was truly a character that there was nobody else like. And I thought Bill Connolly on ESPN made a really good comparison this morning when he said he was like a family member. And, sometimes he'd say some stuff and you'd be like, well, Mike, I don't really agree with that. But, you loved him. And I think the sport was better with characters like him in it. Because, I think college football has changed so much over the course of time. And, there's the number of personalities in this sport. I don't think it's quite like it used to be with people like Spurrier and Bobby Bowden, people of that mindset and sort of that way of going about doing their thing. Mike Leach was very much of that kind of persona. And it's such tough news to hear that he's no longer with us. Kip, what are your memories, things that come to mind when it comes to Mike Leach and just what he meant to you as a fan of the sport?
In a landscape of coach speak, Mike Leach had no filter. He told it like it is, for better or for worse, whether it's profane, appropriate, profound. We always knew to tune in anytime he had a microphone in front of him because he was going to, provide a gift to us for that day. We would be talking about it, usually, smiling. He would bring a smile to all of our faces, regardless of fan base. And you see that in all of the coaches and all the fan bases that are reaching out to just give their thoughts to, the former Mississippi State coach and that fan base that's dealing with this shocking news. You see not just the legacy that he had, but just the impact that, college football doesn't have to be, an uptight, these speeches or quotes that that are canned or that just seem like you're reading from a script. I don't think Mike Leach ever read from a script, and that was something that's going to have a lasting memory. But then also you see all the people telling stories of how he went out of his way to make their day or their experience, their life easier. Whether it's the reporters, other coaches, the fact that he tried to find, Cadillac Williams before the game to make the handshake as easy as possible because he knew how much Cadillac had on his plate before that game. Just all of these stories. And then, you think about the Egg Bowl. And I think if, the best way to honor Mike Leach is to think about his quote after that game. He said, the better we get, the more we'll be able to hoist trophies. And if that's all it takes, I'm going to invent a trophy for every game so they can try to hoist something up. He was always thinking about, ways to bring more enjoyment to the game of football. And I think that's how we should honor him. We should create a trophy for every football game and every matchup. Make a name for every single, game that's played, non-conference, conference, and make sure we have a trophy for every game to remember just everything, the color and the enjoyment that he brought to the game of college football, that a guy who had a law degree from Pepperdine could, come in here and outsmart all these college football coaches that, thought that there was a certain way you had to do things every game. And he taught us that there's not a certain way you have to do things at any time. And he did it his way all the way through. And I think, we were all better for having him in our lives. And I think that we need to remember that as we go in our day-to-day actions and get back to just covering the game of football and talking about football. Because I never really had a negative thought about Mike Leach. I always just thought, this guy is everything I love about this game. And I just am glad to have seen him for the short time that we did. And it is still shocking that it was so short.
Couple of games against Georgia in 2020 and 2022, a shootout in Athens in 2020, 31-24, and then going to Starkville this year, 45-19, Georgia wins. One of the bright spots that I have seen today following the news that Mike Leach has passed was the amount of stories people have posted on social media. Just sitting here thinking about it, I compare it to Bill Murray. People always talk about, it was, like in this bar in Chicago, and I turn around and Bill Murray's buying people drinks. I've seen all kinds of, stories that people are sharing, and that's been really nice. And just to sort of wrap this up, obviously thoughts and prayers with Mike Leach's wife, Sharon, their kids, their grandkids, the Mississippi State community, and really the college football community as a whole, because this was a huge figure in this sport that we've lost. And I wanted to read just part of this quote that Cliff Kingsbury, who played for Mike Leach at Texas Tech, obviously has gone on to have a lot of success as a head coach in his own right. He said, "Our sport was better because of Mike Leach and is far less interesting without him." And to me, that totally sums up Mike Leach. So switching gears, Kip, let's talk a little bit about this past weekend and, what was going on for one Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, I was going to say, I spent the week at home just seeing how dreary the weather was. It rained off and on every day, pretty cloudy. But, what did you have going on this past week?
Oh, nothing. Was able to go up to New York, which, funny enough, that was the first time I have ever been to New York City. Got to go up there with Stetson Bennett being a Heisman finalist. And it was kind of funny, and I wrote about this in a column yesterday. I totally had understood there was the possibility Stetson could go to New York, but it's like I hadn't really thought about it. And I definitely didn't think about it from my perspective of what that would mean. And I'm actually cooking dinner. I'm watching NFL Countdown, and they go in alphabetical order. So the very first name they say is Stetson, and I'm like, wait, should I go to New York for this? And credit to our boss, and also credit to my fiance. I was like, "Are you gonna be okay if I leave for essentially a week?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's all right." Got to go up there. Such a fun experience. I mean, I had a great time in New York as a whole. Enough of sort of time between the schedules to kind of see New York and also get to interview all the players and get a chance to kind of pick their brains about being in New York for the Heisman. I don't think anyone expected Stetson Bennett to win. I thought there was a chance he could be a finalist, but I didn't expect him to win. Thought there was a chance maybe he could finish third in the final vote, maybe over CJ Stroud. He finishes fourth. To me, and again, this was another column I wrote on Sunday on my way back to Atlanta. He had nothing to lose going up there. And he struck me in the interviews we did with him. We had a couple chances to talk to him on his own. And there was also a press conference with all four finalists. I think it was a situation where Stetson was just taking it all in. He did not strike me as someone that was of the mindset, if I don't win, then, what did I do? I wasted 3 or 4 days. I think he understood the magnitude of just being there. Again, it had been 30 years since a Georgia player was a Heisman finalist, Garrison Hurst, way back in 1992. I think he was there to sort of enjoy the entire moment, and was really struck. You could kind of bounce around and talk to some of the other players. And, I think those guys really did appreciate Stetson's story and what it took to get there. I was particularly impressed just with what CJ Stroud, Ohio State's quarterback, a guy that's going to face off against Bennett in a few weeks. He said, I tip my cap to him, man. And he said that he told Stetson, how cool is it that you get to inspire people with your story? It was just so cool. And one of the downsides of covering the Heisman, you're not in the room when they are doing the ceremony. We were not even in the same building. They kind of had us set up watching on projectors, but still, just to hear Kirby talk about it, to hear Stetson's parents talk about it. I know he didn't come home with a new trophy, but I still think, regardless, what a great experience for a guy that, this guy is going to be a Georgia legend. And has already done so much to make his story one of the most unique and one of the craziest in college football history.
Yeah, I knew you were going to be outside of that room. I had read that's how it went down, and it brought back just such pleasant memories of me going up to Brooklyn to cover Isaiah Wilson's announcement and getting up there. The 24/7 Sports flew me up there to cover that announcement, a 5-star offensive tackle at the time, and I get there and I'm in the an office with a whiteboard, and they just pull down the projection screen, and I proceed to watch a 72-minute long Christmas pageant, which ended with a 6'7" elf, pulling a dog out of a box, a gift box there. Different experiences for us, but this had that one similarity there. And I think for, just the CJ Stroud aspect, just the fact that Stetson Bennett was his host. Georgia got in there and was trying to land CJ Stroud coming out of high school. And Stetson Bennett was the host for CJ Stroud during his official visit. So I think him being in New York, it is just part of that journey, just that we're all watching, that this quarterback that was counted out and doubted at every single aspect continues to surprise everyone, but maybe not himself. I think this was probably a surprise for him, just because I think he's just locked in to the playoffs and that team aspect and what, the goal is for Georgia and what they have ahead of them. This was probably like just cold water being splashed on his face, going up to New York and going through all of that and seeing it. You can only hope that he was able to just catch his breath, take a moment, and kind of just take it all in and know that he earned that. He earned the opportunity to be there and to have people actually praise him and say, this isn't the generational defense that got you here. Your level of play was elite. And you were one of the best players in college football this year for one of the best teams in college football. And so you hope Stetson Bennett was able to just acknowledge that to himself, and that he got back and probably just pushed that to the side, and it's right back to work for him. And a Georgia team that, as you said, with CJ Stroud, will be facing once the best players in college football.
Kind of funny the way it all worked out with CJ Stroud, who mentioned Georgia was probably second behind Ohio State when he was being recruited. Caleb Williams was also a player that visited Georgia that Stetson hosted, and he talked a little bit about that. Favorite memories out of that trip, a lot of really cool moments, going to Cat's Deli, kind of getting to go around to one of the little shopping villages and get to see and do a little Christmas shopping, mark a few things off the list. But in terms of the Heisman, I think the memory that's going to stick with me, and it's something that I'm going to try to write about in the next day or so. There's a press conference on Saturday before the big show. And one of the last questions is actually Dog Nation's Connor Riley, who asked it to each of the finalists, how did your team's success essentially get you here? And Stetson was the first person who answered it and, talked about, what the team was able to do, how that helped him, and obviously put him in a position to be a finalist. All four players answer. They're getting ready to end the press conference, and Stetson kind of leans in the mic and is like, can I say one more thing? And they're like, yeah. And he took the time to really credit the scout team and said, how much they prepare, and, their games are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, our practices. And that just really struck me. Again, he was a guy that was in that position. And I think that he understood sort of the moment he had and sort of, I think, had a moment where he was like, man, I really should say something about those guys. That really struck me and impressed me. And again, I think he really made the most of that weekend in New York. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, talk about the upcoming signing period, talk about the transfer portal, and just sort of what we expect to see on that front from the Bulldogs. Welcome back, everybody. Well, let's start when we talk about the next few weeks and what we are expecting to see. Let's start with the transfer portal. At this point, and as we're talking, making sure to note this, it's Tuesday, December 13th at 12:21 Eastern Time, because things can change. By the time we post this, things could have changed. But as of now, Georgia hasn't landed anybody in the portal, and at this point, Bill Norton, defensive lineman, is the only Georgia player to go into the portal. That obviously could change as we go forward in the days and weeks to come. Now, Kip, we know Georgia has offered a couple of wide receivers out of the portal at this point. Ra Thomas from Mississippi State, Dante Cephas from Kent State. Ra Thomas was on campus this weekend to get a chance to kind of check out Georgia. Sounds like also Auburn and Tennessee are in the mix for the former Mississippi State wide receiver. What are your early thoughts on what we've heard, what we've seen so far, as far as the portal is concerned for Georgia, with both players they're targeting and then also seeing a guy like Bill Norton go into the portal?
Well, I'll start with Bill Norton. I mean, it's obvious that Georgia has built pretty good depth on the defensive line, and this is just normal. It's going to happen, and you just look at the transfer portal. He won't be the only one. I mean, Georgia has had 5 to 10 guys leave via the transfer portal the last couple of years, very successful years, and it's going to continue because guys want to see the field, and so it. Honestly, this was normal before, normal offseason attrition. I think, covering Georgia for, I think this is year 16, 17. I've lost count at this point, but usually I would count in the offseason. The average would be about, 7 guys each offseason that would not be on the roster by the time the season started. That was well before the transfer portal. It's just, things happen. Back then they'd have to hang up the cleats. It was like you had medical red shirts. You had guys that are just like, I'm not seeing the field, and so I'm not, I'm just going to go ahead and get my degree and move on. But now, you have the opportunity. You don't have to just graduate before you can go to another team and play immediately. You can leave, and so this is just going to be a normal part of college football, and I'm sure that Bill Norton will find a chance to get on the field, probably at a pretty good program. And as for Georgia, we've said it. We made it clear, what Georgia was going to be looking for in the transfer portal. And I think their actions so far have kind of backed that up. Is they need help a wide receiver. They need guys who can come in, make an impact, but they also just need depth. We saw this. The one thing we were talking about most of the year, and honestly last year as well, is they didn't have enough playmakers at wide receiver. We were talking about guys being hurt, whether it's Arian Smith, obviously George Pickens last season, and you look at A.D. Mitchell this year, what their offense was missing without more than, 1 or 2 guys that they can depend on. Brock Bowers, outstanding talent. Lad McConkey made a lot of plays for Georgia this year, but you need more than that these days. And it's not just the fact that Georgia rotates its guys. It's just that you got to have got more than 2 or 3 guys so opposing defenses can't key in on those guys. And honestly, you look at Georgia's wide receiver position and you talk about, why can't they get elite playmakers? Why don't they rack the stats up? I also just got to look at the way that Kirby Smart stresses his players, the way that he makes them practice every day, this brand of football that Georgia likes to play and why they've been so successful, physicality. And that takes its toll on guys at the wide receiver position as well. They have to be able to go out there and be physical. They need to be able to, set the perimeter for the run game. And they have to do that every day in practice as well. And it is not easy. And that is why Georgia rotates its wide receivers, because of the stress per snap that they ask of their guys. And that's helped them be very successful. And so you got to have more than just 2 or 3 guys, because the chances are you might have a guy get hurt, and you got to have these guys as fresh as possible. And you just look at Ra Thomas. That's a guy that's 6'2", 200 pounds, and has the ability to, break tackles, yards after the catch. It's clear that he is highly valued by the Georgia coaching staff, and they went ahead and tried to get him in town as quickly as possible. We'll see, if he wants to make a decision before seeing other programs. I think the 21st is when the kind of the deadline there. That's a guy that they want to get and they want to add into the mix. Whether he's a 1, 2, or 3 or 4 receiver doesn't matter. Like I said, they need to have up to 6 guys they can trust. And it was pretty clear that, they did not have that many guys this season. I think also the Missouri transfer, Dominic Lovett. It was reported by Rusty this morning. Georgia's trying to get him on campus. If they're able to get him on campus this week, that is a number 1, number 2 guy right there. He's a dynamic weapon, and I think he could be a guy that could really change the whole dynamic of Georgia's offense. He had, I think, 56 catches, 846 yards last season. I think that was 3rd in the SEC behind Jalen Hyatt, and I think Juice Wells at South Carolina. That's definitely a guy that can change Georgia's overall outlook for next year in a hurry and help whoever is the quarterback for the Bulldogs next season.
Yeah, he had 6 receptions for 84 yards in that game against Georgia, and really kind of had Georgia on its heels. I mean, there was really, looking back, that was the closest Georgia came to losing. And I think that he would be a guy you would definitely want, but he's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going after, so it's going to be something to watch. It's such a busy and really unique time of the year, Kip, with the fact that, once again, we have the early signing period. I believe that's the 21st that it's going to officially open up. Georgia is in good shape, as we know, in the recruiting realm. They are ranked 2nd nationally right now with 23 commits. Kip, what do you expect from this early signing period as far as how many guys that Georgia expects will probably go ahead and sign rather than waiting till February, and any other targets they have that might decide to make an announcement in this time?
Yeah, right now Georgia's got the number 2 class in the country, I believe. I think that this group, it's really, really solid from top to bottom at different positions. I like the balance. 23 guys on board right now. And I think, they do plan to add a couple more guys. And you also just kind of look at this group and see, who's signing early. Right now, I think I have 13 or 14 guys that have gotten back to me and said they plan to sign and enroll early. Anytime you can get double-digit guys, not just to sign, but enroll early, it's huge. It's what Georgia's done under Kirby Smart, getting everyone on campus early, getting them acclimated to college, just going to college. And then obviously spring football is big as well. And there's a couple guys that are signing early. I think Troy Bowles, Chris Peel, Kelton Smith, and Peyton Woodring, the kicker. Those guys are signing, but they're enrolling after the spring semester. Still a couple guys I'm waiting to hear back from, but I do think Georgia adds to this group during the early signing period. You got 4-star defensive lineman Jordan Hall. I believe Kirby Smart is doing his in-home with him, I believe today, and making sure to get in that one visit and locking him down. That's a guy that Georgia's been in good shape for throughout the cycle. But again, he is, being diligent with the process and making sure he considers, every program. I know that Florida, Alabama also still trying to, stay in the mix with him as well. He is going to announce his decision and sign during the early signing period. And then 5-star edge Damon Wilson out of Venice, Florida as well. He's a guy that, just Georgia made sure that they wanted to get that, that last visit with him and get in there and make a push for him as well, fighting Ohio State. I think that you look at those programs going back and forth on a recruit, playing in this college football playoff. It's clear that both programs are at, performing at a high level right now. It's been back and forth between the two programs. I think, the location has kind of emerged as a factor, as it often does, as players get closer to the decision, talking with their family's ability to come see them play easily. Georgia obviously has an edge in that aspect with Damon being from Venice, Florida. That's a guy that if Georgia's able to land him, that is either the number 1 or number 2 position in need right now. We talk wide receiver, the edge position, and Georgia is building a strong class at the edge position. You get a guy 6'4", 230 pounds, the number 2 edge in the country on 24/7 Sports composite. That's a big get for Georgia. He is also planning on announcing his decision on December 21st. kind of like where Georgia is right now. I think they got the momentum in his recruitment. So you're able to land two guys like that. You see what happens with NC State running back commitment, Kyron Jones, out of Charlotte Christian. Georgia likes him at defensive back. They're able to add a guy that's, I think, runs a 10-7 100-meter dash. He's a guy with big speed as well. They're going to stack the secondary class once again after, bringing in an outstanding class last year. You add him to a group that has A.J. Harris. I think Georgia is really building, a group that could push for the number one class overall. I think they got some flips in the mix as well. Some guys that, are still kind of thinking things over and could end up, playing for or signing with the Georgia Bulldogs when all is said and done. So I think it's going to be an entertaining, couple of days, and the transfer portal just only multiplies that as schools try to figure out what they're going to do with their last spots.
Some announcements, like you said, kept coming on December 21st. Georgia might get a few presents early from old Santa Claus before Christmas gets here. So before we wrap this episode up, I want to point out for everybody who follows our content, subscribe to us on Wednesday. We are going to have a chance to talk to Kirby Smart and a few players. We're not sure who the players will be, but at noon there's going to be some availability. So be on the lookout on the website and also on Twitter. Go out there and tweet some of the updates as we get closer and closer to not only that sign-in period, but also to the Peach Bowl against Ohio State. And then before we get out of here, men's basketball minute. The December period is a pretty sort of spread out one for Georgia. They played Georgia Tech last week, lost 79-77. Kind of a heartbreaker for Georgia. They led by 4 with about 2 minutes to go and just didn't score again. Had some missed opportunities, 3 turnovers on their final 3 possessions. A game that I really think that they were kind of kicking themselves they did not win. And they were playing shorthanded, did not have Kyron Lindsey, did not have another player as well. I'm totally blanking on who else was not there. But they played shorthanded with a couple of contributors that they count on not able to go, and gave Georgia Tech all they could handle in Atlanta. So tough loss. That was really the first game so far this season that I thought that they would win, and they did not win. But they're 7-3, still in good shape. They do not play again until December 18th when they're back in Atlanta to play Notre Dame. And that's going to be another big measuring stick. I think that this Notre Dame team will be good. Second straight ACC opponent that this Georgia team will face. And I'm expecting probably on Friday we'll get a chance to talk to Mike White and probably a couple players getting ready for that big game. But other than that, kind of a spread out December. They play Chattanooga. They play Ryder. I think that might be it. It's pretty spread out as far as with exams and also just the holiday season. But again, a big test coming on Sunday against Notre Dame. So we're going to wrap this episode up. Appreciate Kip for popping on. I appreciate everybody who watched this live and listened to it live, or is listening to it after the fact, watching the video after the fact. We appreciate y'all's support. Make sure, again, go take advantage of that 50% off VIP sale with the early sign-in period, because all kinds of nuggets. I think me and Kip both were reading Rusty's story right before we popped on when he mentioned Dominic Lovett as a guy that could be in the mix for Georgia. So all kinds of good intel, and we appreciate those of you who do subscribe, and can't wait to see the rest of you guys on there as well. So we'll wrap up this episode. For Kip Adams, I am Jordan Hill. Appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate everybody taking the chance to watch and listen. And until next time, take care.